Scott Frost has ground to make up in recruiting. But what kind of inroads has UCF's head coach made?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. Joining me as he does from time to time is my good friend Brian Smith, host of Locked On the Portal, to talk about recruiting news. On today's show, we're going to talk about the recruiting landscape for UCF, a recent QB commit that they've had, and what kind of ground UCF has to make up in recruiting here in Scott Frost's first year. Brian, let's start at the top here. Before we started recording, we talked a little bit about UCF's got a lot of work to do in recruiting. No defensive line commits, one offensive line commit. You know, talk to me about the deficiencies that you're seeing here. And we knew it was going to be a tall task for Scott Frost in this takeover. For all intents and purposes, I would characterize what he's got in front of him as a rebuild. You start rebuilding by recruiting at a high level. A UCF without the results on the field, maybe it's a little bit harder for Scott Frost to get some of the guys he needs, particularly in the trenches, which will really define his team.
This is the bottom line. You and I have covered SEC football, Big Ten football, UCF, different programs. One constant remains. If you're not the better team in the trenches, your chances of winning that day are greatly diminished. One offensive lineman commitment. I really like him. He's a kid out of Georgia. Mr. Charlton, he's a big drink of water, probably going to be an offensive tackle for the Knights. That's great, but that's the only lineman that they have pledged. There are a couple other guys that maybe could end up playing on the line, but for now, that's it. Not having a defensive lineman committed concerns me. You know, I've been looking at their official visit list. They've got a few defensive linemen on the board, but there aren't enough. So I'm concerned that they're going to come up not just short this year, but woefully so. If you fall behind in the Power Four, years 2 and 3, it becomes a monumental task to catch up thereafter. Like, this is a big year for Scott and UCF on the field. That's kind of awkward because, you know, they just started playing in this league. But look, there is no mercy at the Power Four level.
Yeah,
absolutely none. And teams know they're struggling on recruiting too. I guarantee it. They're getting negative recruited and everything else. I don't know the recruiting plan, but if they don't figure it out and get some more of these linemen on campus this summer for OBs, they're not going to be in the winner's circle enough for UCF fans liking in years to come. They got a lot of ground to make up there.
It puts a lot more pressure on the portal, doesn't it? If you're not getting these kids through high school, when that first portal or when the next portal window opens, they're gonna have to get in there and find some guys to fill these holes. Now, we never know how good a high school recruiting class is until 2, maybe 3 years into the tenure, when those guys have had time to develop. You and I have spoken repeatedly about how offensive line is one of the more developmental positions on the field, meaning it takes those guys at least a year in some cases to get their bodies physically ready for the physicality of Power Four play. So you don't expect a lineman necessarily on average to come in and compete immediately, but you got to go to the portal. You still need the guys. So you're going to have to go to the portal and find those guys. And I would say of all the positions on the field, particularly offensive line, it's hard to find good offensive linemen in the portal.
It's almost impossible. For whatever reason, offensive linemen are mentally a little bit different in how they look at things. They tend to bond. They tend to stick together. A kid will wait till he's a senior, redshirt, junior, whatever, just to play a little bit. Other spots, man, we both know they gone.
Yeah.
they're out the door. So it's really unique. And at the same time, UCF probably, like every other school, is going to be looking for especially offensive tackles and defensive tackles. There's never enough of those guys anyway. So you need to at least bring in guys that have long-term potential, even if they're not impact, and develop them slow. If you win with juniors, seniors, and fifth-year seniors, That's no different than what Tom Osborne used to do. And some of the UCF teams that Knight McKenzie Milton played on, they had guys that were like 3-star guys coming out of high school. They didn't start right away, but they played. And then when they got their chance, they were really, really good. So right now, though, I don't see enough numbers on the official visit list. They've got a handful, but they're way behind. And I'm not really sure what the deal is, especially like locally. I don't see enough Orlando, Cocoa, Lakeland, those kind of kids. I don't see them on the visit list. That is also concerning for me. They got a few, but not enough.
Right now, UCF has 9 commitments, 5 out of the state of Florida so far. So they're trying to make inroads in Florida, but they may have to think a little bit more conventionally. You just got to get guys at this point. Hopefully, Scott Frost is not recruiting too many warm bodies, but they're filling needs. It's important that they fill needs, right? Like you can fill up a recruiting class, but if they're not filling needs, then certainly you're going to come up short. To kind of round out the discussion here, what are you hearing in terms of what is the perception of the staff right now on the recruiting trail? Do people have questions? Do they know? Yeah, we know he's recruited the state of Florida before. Obviously, he was the head coach at UCF, back, in 2017. But what is the perception of what Scott Frost is building right now on the recruiting trail? Are we hearing positive things, negative things, or is it just neutral?
It's kind of neutral, but it's right now is the make or break point. This is for every program, not UCF. Mm-hmm. The next 3 weeks is your ball game. These are the 3 official visit weekends. Either you make it or you break it. And right now their visit list is pretty short. Let's see if they can get some more kids to flip their visit lists around. This is the game. Behind closed doors, Mike, behind closed doors. We're trying to get this kid to change his visit from Syracuse or Florida State or Miami, whatever it is. They've got to win a few of those battles to get them on campus. And secondarily, they got to get kids in the long game. Like even if they commit somewhere else, stay on them, get them to visit in the fall. But I haven't heard a lot from other recruiting analysts about UCF, like very little. And I'm not sure if that's good or bad. I think it's just because they're not doing as well in Florida as some of us expected. Most of my contacts are in Florida. But they've got, like you said, they got 5 guys committed from outside the Sunshine State, which is a good sign. It's kind of ironic that it started that way. I thought it'd be more like, if you told me right now they had 9 commits, I'd say probably 7 are from Florida. They only got 4. But if, like you said, if you get players, you get players. Antoine Sharp and some other guys are pretty good. Like he just decided he wasn't going to take his Florida State official visit. That's good for UCF. But overall, I still think there needs to be more effort, especially inside the Sunshine State for the UCF Knights.
Well, they've got to get guys in, but they did get one guy. They added to the QB room. Now, we talked about the first QB commit they had in Kane Archer. We'll talk about their next QB commit right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't miss moments. If you have not seen Tyrese Halliburton this NBA playoff season, I don't know what to tell you because he is dynamite. I'm betting every Tyrese Halliburton prop here on FanDuel. FanDuel makes it easy to do that in-game before tip-off. You can do live player props and bet every performance trend as well as same-game parlays. So you have more ways to play and smart and win big. Look, you want to know which players are showing up to the biggest moments and how to track them. FanDuel has every tool you need to do that. And look, if you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. That's $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. UCF got a QB commit, Dante Carr. Great football name, by the way. Dante Carr commits to Scott Frost, McKenzie Milton, and the UCF Knights. This kid is from Minersville, Pennsylvania. He's a 2026 commit, 6'3", 200 pounds. He had some offers from Army, Coastal Carolina. Talk to me about Dante Carr. You and I talked about Kane Archer. just a hidden gem for this staff. I like Kane Archer a lot, but he'll be competing with Dante Carr for that QB spot. You can only play one. Talk to me about Dante Carr.
He's a guy that does his best work off platform when things break down. He is incredibly elusive. Ironically, I'm not saying he's the same player, but stylistically, he's got McKenzie Milton vibes in terms of making the first guy miss and just creating something out of nothing. Sometimes he runs, sometimes he throws, sometimes he extends the play and figures it out at the very last second, making a decision that's best for him. But what I also like about him, he's not afraid to throw the deep ball. He throws a really nice deep ball, giving his guys a chance to run under it. Where I'd like to see him be more consistent and just grow the most is the hardest thing. From the pocket, making progressions and throwing the ball in the middle of the field. There's very little of that. Part of it, I don't think he's got the greatest receivers to throw to. Competition overall is not that great, but he's got a decent arm. He's got frame, and he's very, very athletic. So he's a big piece of clay right now. And I think where UCF is at as a program, like you said, it's a rebuild. They're going to let guys come in and compete, allow the chips to fall where they may, and whatever happens, happens. That's what McKenzie Milton did. Nobody expected him to come in. He got his shot as a freshman, and the rest was history. Who knows? If he picks up system and whatnot, maybe he'll be their next star quarterback. But again, he's very athletic, makes plays outside the pocket. And I think that's what Scott Frost and his staff want. They want playmakers. They don't want just guys that are statues back there. They want somebody that can move their feet, get outside the pocket, and create with their feet to score. And sometimes kind of draw defense up and throw it over their heads. That's what he really does the most on his film.
Well, Dante Carr, 90 carries in his junior season for 1,182 yards and 23 touchdowns on the ground. That's an average of 13.1 yards per carry, completely ridiculous for a quarterback. You mentioned the video game numbers. It kind of looks like he's running around playing with the middle schoolers. But with his arm, 98 completions on 180 attempts. That's a 54% completion percentage. Talk to me about this completion percentage for him. Why so low for Dante Carr?
They throw deep a lot. This is an offense that's predicated on chucking it. They're not worried about percentage. They're worried about yards per reception. This is like Oakland Raiders 1975. I mean, like literally, it's what it reminds me of. They don't throw a lot of screens. They don't throw in the middle of the field. They don't throw a lot of hitches and slants. It's more of an 8 route, a 9 route. They're trying to go vertical, sluggo, that kind of stuff. And if that's what you want to do, you're not going to hit as many. But he's got the arm to get it down the field, so that's part of it. And I think, again, he's still growing as a quarterback. He's got another year of high school left. Maybe with the continuity he has with some of the guys returning, you'll see somebody develop into a player that he's more comfortable throwing the ball in the middle of the field, some of those shorter routes where it's tighter windows. But right now, he'd rather throw it deep. Either my guy gets it or nobody does. So the completion percentage is low. That's a little concerning. I get it, but he doesn't have a Division I guy to throw to. They don't have a pure burner or anybody like that. They got some good players, but nobody great. And that's part of it too. So how many drops did he have out of that? That's, they're not going to throw that out there on the film. So, but again, Dante's got a good arm and he can throw it down the field. Question is, who's going after it too? That's just as important as where Dante's throwing.
Yeah, look, but at the end of the day, if you're making low percentage throws down the field, obviously if you don't have receivers who can go get 50-50 balls, even the percentages might not look great. But this is a guy that McKenzie Milton, Scott Frost feel like they can develop. And early on, it may be really important to get those developmental pieces that you feel like you can work with. Until they have results on the field, Brian, this may just be the lane that they have to move in. My friend Andrew Gluchov, we talk every week about UCF not necessarily having the money to go out and sway those higher level guys to come to UCF over the other options that they're going to have. So until you get there, and this is not a knock to any of these kids' talent. I feel like that every year there's a 3-star that comes in and plays like a 5-star. Can Scott Frost and McKenzie Milton find those guys while they're building the program? This is going to be a long-term build. I think fans need to have patience as they work through the recruiting process to try to find their guys.
Yeah, this is part of it. This is year one of the rebuild. This could be a 3, 4, 5-year deal. I mean, UCF is trying to establish a foothold in the Power Four. I don't know how quick this is going to go, but we're in a new era. We don't normally have power shifts like this. The power shift that's taken place in the last 5 years is the most raucous in college football history, with all the transfers of not players, but programs from one league to another, and UCF's going up a step. So it could be a slow roll. The biggest key, though, is just to continue to grind on the recruiting trail, and they've got to make some noise this season, Mike. I really think the long game is the key for them. If they lose a kid during the summer, that's one thing, but that doesn't mean you stop recruiting him. You try to get him on campus for one of the Big 12 games, and maybe like they've got North Carolina too, if I remember right. I'm sure they're going to try to bring in a bunch of kids for that game. I know I would. They need something to spark, to kind of flip what I talked about earlier, especially with the linemen, because if they're not getting those kind of kids on campus, that's a problem, especially like North Carolina. That's an easy sell, man. If you're an Orlando area kid, why would you not want to be at that game? That's cool. They've got a chance with it. So it's a little early. I'm nervous for UCF, but there's a long, long way to go.
Well, they've got a lot of ground to make up. We'll talk about how they make up that ground next on Locked On UCF. How does Scott Frost make up ground here, especially versus his other Big 12 peers that have the money to spend? Look, it's a lot of this is going to be about money. It's going to be, and unfortunately, that's where the game has gone. The House settlement, I haven't seen a lot of movement there, but the judge asked them to go back to the table and fix the walk-on issue, because a lot of kids are going to get screwed in that deal. Right. But we saw Texas Tech, spend a lot of money in the portal this past portal season. If you believe any of the rumors, anywhere from $10 to $30 million. They had a billionaire that just said, "Screw it, I'm going to get my school where it needs to be, and I'm going to give them a bunch of money to spend it." UCF didn't have that kind of money. What can Scott Frost do? Like, is there a string that he can pull on with these recruits to help make up ground? Or is this just a matter of time? He just needs to field a competitive team, show some progress, and maybe pull off something similar to what Arizona State did. They were picked to finish dead last in the Big 12 last year and somehow won the whole thing. And when they got there, they didn't embarrass the conference. They competed. Does Scott Frost have to do that?
Well, if you look at what Arizona State did, they hit on the portal. That's part of what UCF has to do this upcoming December, but that's down the road. We'll get to that in a second. First off, what I was just talking about at the end of the last segment, they got to have a splash game this year.
Okay.
Where they beat somebody and draw attention. I'm not saying they're going to, I don't have the schedule in front of me. I'm not saying they're going to go into Kansas State or Oklahoma, wherever, and beat somebody 48-3. But they've got to have a game where it's like, okay, UCF is cool. I need to look at them. Because right now they're obviously not getting enough looks. We've established that so far on tonight's podcast. It's blatant. But at the same time, that's what UCF is famous for. They have been so good at upsetting teams and just overall upsetting the apple cart. Why can't they do it again? This is nothing new for Frost. When he got there the first time, it wasn't like they were awesome. Yeah, he was rebuilding then too.
Yeah.
Which guy or guys is it going to be? The leadership and all that stuff. I have no idea. I don't know their roster well enough, but they got to have that. Secondarily, I also think they're going to have to get somebody to commit that also catches other recruits by surprise. That's just effort. That's relationships. Yeah, sure, NIL plays a big part, but even schools like Auburn, who you and I are very familiar with, in other SEC programs, money will get you in the final conversation. Relationships are still the finalizer. You're not going to go somewhere you don't like the people you're going to be with. That's not how that works. They have to get kids on campus for a bunch of unofficial visits. Their summer camps got to be efficient, not only for the seniors, but for the underclass. They got to get started on that, get ahead, because they're obviously behind this year. All of those things happen. And then in the fall, it doesn't matter when the kids commit. It's do they sign?
Yeah.
That is how you make up ground. They got to continue into the fall with official visits. They don't care if kids are committed to Florida State or Miami or South Carolina, whatever it is. Got to get them on campus again and again and again. It's just relentlessness, because right now they're behind on that. And you can't continue on that path and even have a good portal. You've got to get to the point where well over half your roster are high school kids. It's proven. Like, you look at the teams that did well in the playoff last year, Arizona State was the exception, not the rule. Elite high school recruiting is the way you win at a high level. UCF's got a long way to go there.
Well, after the season, Kenny Dillingham got on the microphone, and the first thing he said was, guys, give me a bunch of money if you want to see this again, because to sustain it, you need the money to compete in high school recruiting. I've talked to a lot of coaches. They still feel like, hey, we get the portal, but the way to build a long-term sustainable winner is still through high school recruiting. Now, you talked about that schedule and getting some big wins. I think that early season date with Bill Belichick in North Carolina could help bolster you and get your program the national exposure. It's going to be a circus that follows him wherever he goes this year, Brian, and UCF needs to be positioned to capitalize on that. If you can get an early season win versus North Carolina, and when you don't have the talent, you got to be better prepared, and he's just got to flat out coach the other team. If they can do that, I think they have a shot. Now, after North Carolina, they open up their Big 12 schedule versus Kansas State. This might be one of the top two teams that they play all year. They've got Texas Tech on the schedule. They end their season with BYU. I agree with you. I think there has to be a surprise win in there where you can point to that and say, look, or, you know what, a competitive enough game with somebody who nobody expects them to beat, where you can look at it and say, look, the reason we didn't win this game is because we don't have you. So if you come to UCF, you could be the thing that puts us over the edge. But you can't go and get blown out in every single game and then expect high-profile recruits to come and say, hey, I want you to elevate a bunch of scrubs, obviously, right? So if the development piece is happening, which I think these guys will be pretty good at, I think they've got a chance to make some noise here. But patience is the key to this. You know, they're going to make up ground, but it's going to happen slowly over time, and fans may have to endure some tough seasons along the way.
This is the game. This is the game. It's not necessarily a quick fix to do it properly. Let me give you an example. When the portal started, Florida State curbed the market. They did a great job with it. Mm-hmm. But after other teams started to catch up, what happened to Florida State last year, Mike? How did that go with the portal? Yeah, it was a collapse. You must have your base through the high school ranks, especially O-line, because you win with juniors, seniors, and fifth-year seniors. UCF did that before, too. Some of the guys they've sent to the NFL, et cetera. They were guys that weren't necessarily stars, but they fit the system. They fit UCF. They believed in the program, and it worked out. They can go that route. That's fine. But you need 3 or 4 of those guys every year. That's going to take a few years.
Yeah.
So the in-between this year, next, that winter window with the portal, massive. Absolutely massive. And I'm just going to ask you your opinion. I don't know the answer to this. Do you think they'll at least pony up for one guy? Like, they're going to need at least one offensive lineman out of the portal. That's not just a player, Mike. That's dude. To kind of step up to the level, because like BYU's money's gross.
Yeah, they have ridiculous money.
Texas Tech's money is gross. Oklahoma State's money is gross. Like, that league is looked down upon in the Power Four, but right now it's about to make a surge. Like 13 out of the 15, 60, whatever the number is, of the quarterbacks are returning, or there are transfers in that are experienced guys. That league is nasty this year. UCF's going to see as good a group of quarterbacks as any team in the country. The way you keep the quarterbacks from beating you is they stand on the sideline as you run the ball behind your offensive line.
Yeah.
That has never changed. And it's what Saban did at Alabama when they used to play really good. Let's run the ball here so he can't come back on the field. It's pretty generic, but it's worked for over 100 years. I don't think that's going to fail. UCF's got to start there. They got to spend some money in the portal. There are going to be some tough phone call conversations from the booster club saying, y'all need to get – look, This is simple. Either we're going to do this or we ain't going to win.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is I'm anxious for this house settlement to get put
Me
through,
too.
because once UCF gets direct control of the money, then Scott Frost can say, okay, now this is how much I have to play with. Here's where I'm going to spend until you get to the team that you want. And hopefully in 2 years, that culminates in a team that can really compete. But it's going to take time. And as he shows results, I think you'll see the pocketbooks open a little bit more, and UCF will be in a better place. It's just there's no quick fixes to this, right? He's got, the talent gap. You hear coaches talk about the talent gap between where their team is and the tops of their league. And to get there, unfortunately, you just need money. That's the new game. I mean, Saban retired over it. He said, Brian, like, look, when my message no longer resonated, I knew it was time to hang it up. So he had opportunity to sell, pro prospects to sell. He had development to sell, and he was doing it better than anybody has ever done it at the college football level. If you're Scott Frost, you need the money to at least be good enough that you can still sell on those traditional recruiting aspects, but also it can't be nothing. Right? Like, you can't only sell that anymore. So it's going to be a mix of things that get them there. I'm anxious and ready to continue the conversation as we move through this. But results on the field are always king. If you can show recruits in real time that it works and that they are going to be able to play on college football's biggest stages, right, and have a chance to show off their stuff, you got to schedule tough. Right, you've got to schedule those big games, those big non-conferences. One off the top of my head I can think of, Baylor, and it opens the season versus Auburn on a Friday night. I think it's August 29th, and that's going to be a big game. If you're Baylor, you're selling that. You're saying, hey, come to Baylor. You're going to get to play this game. That's why I think this North Carolina game is going to be so key for them. North Carolina is not exactly a football powerhouse, but they're Bill Belichick, the best. Arguably the best NFL coach of all time, is now their coach. So it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be really fun to watch. And I'll be looking forward to your recruiting updates in the future. This is a fascinating conversation. Brian Smith, I want to thank you for joining me. Before we get out of here, as always, tell people where they can find you.
Absolutely. The Portal Podcast, recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal every day, talking about the commitments, the upcoming visits, who's trending, who's out, you name it. We're going to be talking about it on the Portal Podcast.
Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. For your next listen, and go check out our friends at Locked On the Portal. As I mentioned, Brian has the latest in rumors and portal entries and signings. Be the most informed fan on rapid changes in college football. You can find them on YouTube as always. I want to thank Brian for joining me. That's it. We'll see you guys tomorrow on Locked On UCF.